I'm really pleased to welcome our speaker today, Shepard. He is an author, journalist, and filmmaker who has been on the road since 1999, working in over 90 countries. He is the author of Ghost Cities of China, the story of cities without people in the world's most populated country. In this book, he recounts the 2.5 years he spent in China's sparsely populated new cities. And this book, Ghost Cities of China, is on sale at Amazon. His new book is called On the Silk Road, Journeys Through China's Artery of Power, which covers the 3 years that Wade has spent traveling up and down the Belt and Road, trying to decipher what is actually going on. I've had the pleasure of reading several of Wade's articles on Forbes on the Belt and Road, and I encourage you to check them out. They are really fascinating, and he gives you some on-the-ground insights. Wade has also been a guest on top news programs, including BBC World News, NPR Morning Edition, CNBC Squawk Box, ABC News, and CCTV China. Today, he will be speaking on the winners and losers of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Please join me in welcoming him. And one administrative note, we have mics on both sides of the room, as you can see. During the Q&A later on, please go to the mic to ask your questions so that we will be able to capture your voice. Without further ado, please welcome Wade.
Thank you very much, Professor Allen. I don't think I'm on here. Here we go. 5 years ago, there was nothing here. Over the past 3.5 years, I've spent traveling up and down China's Belt and Road and the broader New Silk Road. This is probably the sentence that's been said to me more often than anything else. I'd go out to a new economic development zone, new airport, a fledgling industrial zone, and I look out at what was almost invariably an empty field. And the person that I was with, usually the CEO or someone else involved in the project, would be like, 5 years ago, there was nothing here. And to me, it still looked like there was, nothing there. However, these empty fields, they told me. However, these empty fields, they told me, they were going to define the new tomorrow, the new future, when China has more of a role in the global economy, global politics, and the way that we see our world, and the way our paradigms are constructed today. As Professor Allen said, my name is Wade Shepard. I've been traveling the world for the past 20 years, researching the on-the-ground impact of major economic shifts, political turns, and just trying to find out what is actually happening today as our world changes faster than it's probably ever changed before. My journey started out in China. Well, not my journey. I traveled as a backpacker for about 7 years before that. But my journey in China started out in 2015 when I was a student at Zhejiang University in Hangzhou. And I started getting interested. In that time in China, China's urbanization push was everywhere. New buildings being built, old buildings were being demolished. It was something that you could not miss. But it was something that was so ubiquitous that a lot of people just kind of took it for granted, right? You see just these massive new developments, and you go out and you talk to people about it, and they'll just be like, yeah, that's just something the government was doing. However, I started taking an interest in these places, and this interest mostly came from a trip I took out to the mountains of Zhejiang province to a little mid-tier city called Tiantai. Now, I walked out of the bus station, and instead of making a right-hand turn and going into the city where the people actually lived, the historic core of traditional Tiantai, I made a left. I made a wrong turn and ended up in their new town. And I walked through the streets of a place that was completely built, but completely 100% empty. There was no people there. Now, this is in 2006, And this was a few years before China's ghost cities narrative was set. Nobody really knew about these places. Nobody was really talking about them. And I thought I made some new kind of discovery, right? So I raced back to Hangzhou, went into the office of my advisor, and I was like, oh man, I found this new city out in the mountains of Tiantai. He just looked at me and he said, yeah, those places are everywhere, right? They're no big deal. They're everywhere. But something about, those words, those places are everywhere, made me really interested in that topic. And I started looking for these new cities. And in that era, they were about as easy to find as taking a bus or a train or a taxi out to the city limits, getting off and looking around, right? They were literally everywhere. Now, what China has done in, a 30-year period, but especially in this 10-year period that I call the new city building boom, was unprecedented in human history. Basically, China tore their country down to the studs and rebuilt it. Not only did they rebuild like their existing cities, but they built literally hundreds of new cities and thousands of new urban districts. Over a 10-year period, China built 29,000 kilometer high-speed rail network. Is now by far the longest in the world. 100,000 kilometers of new highways, 100 new airports. And this is what's really got me, was 3,500 new urban areas, 500 economic zones, and 1,000 city-level developments, 1,000 new cities. And I started going out to these new cities. I spent about 2.5 years wandering through them, talking to the people there, living in them even, and trying to figure out what was actually going on in China's new city building boom. And what I found was, by that time the ghost city narrative had been established, right? The dominant narrative in the international media was China's building new cities to artificially inflate GDP. Kind of cooked the books on their economic prowess, and that ultimately the rise of China was a hoax, right? And that China was going to bring down the global economy and blah, 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 and all these things that, by 2020 we know hasn't happened and probably won't happen, at least not anytime soon. And what I learned in these new cities is that, as kind of crazy as it was, as insane the development methods was, there was kind of a plan to it, and this plan, ultimately, it worked. And now we have places like, Chongqing, Wuhan, Chengdu, Xi'an, places that were complete backwaters when I first started traveling in China, that are now some of the most economically dynamic cities in the world. And I would say that China's new city building movement in China was probably the most successful human experiment ever. And this is just a short video of what these cities look like between 2006 and 2012. That's the new South China Mall in Guangdong province. It's the largest mall in the world by a square foot area, but there wasn't many shops there. This is Xinyang, place in Henan. At that time, it was rumored that China was maybe considering moving the capital there, and they cleared out an absolutely massive area to build a new city. And this is Zhengdong New District in Zhengzhou, Henan province. This is the place that 60 Minutes went and called the ghost city and really established that ghost city narrative in China. The story was actually more complex. There was actually people living there, and I showed the 60 Minutes report to people that were living there, and they thought it was wild. I mean, imagine if someone came into your town and started showing you these videos from China that said that nobody lived where you were actually living. And that's just a sample of like the scale of the building that was being done then. Of course, Ordos Kangbasher, which now has about 200,000 people living in it, and it's nowhere near a ghost city today. So we all know what was gained from China's urbanization push. As I said, many of these new development areas that were built via the Go West policy and other urbanization initiatives, really helped propel China to become the #2 economy in the world and put it in the position that it is today. But what was lost? I mean, that's something that's not really looked at as much. I mean, from all this, economic development and economic prowess, 64 million families had their homes demolished and were relocated. More than 1 million traditional villages were wiped off a map, and unmeasurable loss of cultural heritage. I mean, basically everything before 1949 was just gone, and well, is being still just wiped off the face of the earth. So at that time, I was just working as an independent travel blogger. I thought I was, a maverick. I was able to make enough money just traveling and blogging, and it was really living the dream, right? I was able to pick my own topics, research my own stuff, and I didn't have a boss. But then this guy sent me an email. His name is Paul French. He's a New York Times best-selling author, and was wondering if I'd like to write a book for his series that he edited at Zed Books. And at that time, I was just like, yeah, right, dude. You don't want me to write a book for you. My research methods look something like this, right? I just kind of, hitchhike around or ride a bike around, meet people in the streets, talk to them, and then go and talk to the higher ups after that. This is actually the new city of Duqm in Oman. Oh, you watch. Wait and see. No, it wasn't quite a 100% success rate, even though that's what it looks like it. So anyway, but yeah, he was for real. I did the book. It did all right. Started writing for major media. Skip that part. And at some point, I kind of realized that things were getting a little bit more difficult to work in China as an independent journalist, especially one that was publishing in major media, and that my research methodologies may not work anymore. Partially, this was because China started cracking down on foreign media, and also because China started cracking down on the war on corruption. And all of a sudden, all these great sources that I had working for the South China Morning Post that would give me information and show me so many places and basically just gave me everything I wanted, they no longer really wanted to talk to me anymore. So I had to, it's not really my style to kind of sit in an office in Beijing and sit behind a computer and write my story. So I had to look for kind of an escape route. And the most logical escape route was the Belt and Road Initiative, which was a massive, China-led digital and physical infrastructure grid across Eurasia, and basically across the whole planet. That we would see, new Chinese-sponsored economic developed zones, transportation infrastructure, and new cities, basically taking what I found with China with the new city building boom and taking it international and taking it around the world. That's actually a more accurate map of where the routes actually go. And we have these kind of catchphrases and stuff like how the Belt and Road encompasses, 64% of the world population and 30% of global GDP, includes 137 countries and 30 international organizations. However, these 137 countries, they were included as members by signing non-legally binding memorandums of understanding, which aren't exactly deals. So it's a little bit promotional, or overly promotional to say that the Belt and Road includes that many countries. And then, starting around 2015, we had this absolute boom of Chinese people and companies going abroad and making investments, both under the directive of Beijing or even provincial level governments, and on their own. And as of now, we're looking at over $2 trillion of investment spent overseas. And this kind of given us these kind of weird iterations of what the Belt and Road is, such as One Belt, One Road, camel milk made with German technology. Basically, a lot of companies were saying, oh yeah, we're part of the Belt and Road. We're making these big investments, we're spending this money. We're offshoring massive amounts of capital in the name of Xi Jinping's signature policy. But Mr. Xi didn't really like that so much, and he started cracking down on a lot of these private companies and private firms using the Belt and Road's name to further their business interest. And this quote by Maurice Rudolph, he's a China legal researcher from Germany. it really sticks with me, right? Does the West just not get it, or is China not able to explain it? The Belt and Road is nothing if not vague, right? Beijing is very explicit about saying what the Belt and Road isn't. The Belt and Road isn't, Wanda going out and like acquiring companies on their own all over Europe. The Belt and Road isn't, One Belt, One Road camel milk. However, they're not so clear about what it is, or even what actually constitutes a Belt and Road project, or the process of developing these projects. Even still, 7 years later, the Belt and Road is still incredibly murky. But some of the major Belt and Road projects, this is a list of them, and they're not, this isn't the most successful list of projects in the world. I mean, there's Piraeus Port that is doing very well, but it's also very easy to make a port do well. You just send traffic to it. The rest of these places are, well, you'll see. This is Melaka Gateway, a massive project in Malaysia. Started out as one of the marquee projects of the Belt and Road Initiative. There's Lee Ka-chiang looking at a model of it. It sits on the southwest coast of Peninsular Malaysia, which is an area that is very strategically important for China, because you have the East Coast Rail Link and other projects down this area, because it essentially gives China a way to get goods, across a very thin stretch of land, and completely bypass the Strait of Malacca, which is controlled by Singapore and ultimately the United States. And if we look at the broader map of the Belt and Road, what we see is a lot of routes that are essentially being developed to kind of bypass the Strait of Malacca, which is here. We have routes going up through Myanmar, through Bangladesh, Pakistan, of course, with China-Pakistan economic corridor, and of course the overland routes. So basically, we're looking at just an all-out, pan-Eurasian plan for China to be able to solidify supply lines without needing to depend on the Strait of Malacca. Most Chinese goods pass through this strait as of right now, including 70% of their oil resources. So this strategically and in the future, these routes are very important for China to be able to maintain connections, with the rest of the world, and maintain their economic ties, and to get supplies and raw materials that they need in case of an event with the United States and for the potential closure of the Strait of Malacca. So Melaka Gateway project, it's basically an entirely new city built on 4 artificially created islands. Luxury shopping malls, 7-star hotel, Malaysian Eye, Ferris wheel, and all these great things of international development, all built around a booming container port and a booming bulk cargo port. The only problem is that there's people living in this area on the coastline. They just call themselves Portuguese, but they're the direct descendants of the original Portuguese settlers in Malaysia. They're still there today, 500 years later. They speak their own language, which is a mutually intelligible version of Portuguese. And basically, there is no community like this on the planet. They're Christian, and they basically live in their own little area that's kind of separated from the rest of Malacca. I'm not going to go as far as call this like an anarchic community, but the police don't go there, right? There's just people doing their own thing as they have for 500 years. And they're mostly fishermen and restaurateurs, and their livelihood is, you can see how close the Melaka Gateway project is. This is Portuguese settlement here. This is Melaka Gateway project. And the problem is that when you reclaim land, you completely destroy the maritime ecosystem. Through siltation, through changing currents, some areas along the coast will erode while deposits will be put up in other areas. And you could kind of, I don't know if you can really see it from this picture, but this area in between the natural coastline and the project area is being, it's silting in. And this water is going away, and this will all, someday probably, unless they take some massive efforts, probably be, just land coming from here to here. And the problem with that is that, I'll show this real quick. This is just some video from that project. It's the reclamation area. this is the Portuguese people making music and hanging out and living their lives and fishing. And now what happened is that their traditional fishing grounds have been, completely decimated. I mean, just absolutely wiped out. These fishermen took me out in one of their boats to kind of show me the damage. Told me all the fish they used to get, how many fish they get today, which isn't much at all, and all the garbage, and they show me the siltation that's happening. And basically they now need to go like way far out in the sea to catch fish, which is an additional expense, additional dangers, and I don't know, basically their livelihood has been completely disrupted. But what they're most worried about is being relocated, because if you look at the Melaka Gateway plan, where their village is, there's big tall skyscrapers, and there's not big tall skyscrapers where these people live today. So I don't know, the traditional Portuguese fishermen that are now no longer going to have a view of the sea. There's going to be skyscrapers if this project is actually completed, like right in their face. But however, this hasn't really come to pass yet. This project has been going for over 5 years, and it's little more than a slab of reclaimed land. And part of that problem was that the Prime Minister Najib of Malaysia, he had some problems. He signed approximately $36 billion worth of Belt and Road deals with China, and then it was kind of came out that he was taking some money out of the national pot, upwards of $7.6 billion of public money he reputedly embezzled. So he did not win the next election. A new government came in, and they promptly shut down all Belt and Road projects in the country. They were basically shut down for a year, and then gradually they starting up again. However, they're starting up under the banner of being local and not being China-run projects. So if you go out to Melaka Gateway today, even though it's heralded as a shining star of the Belt and Road, the PR people there would be like, it's not Belt and Road. This isn't China. This is local. This is local, right? Oh no, China has nothing to do with this project. This isn't Belt and Road, because the Belt and Road has become severely politicized through its association with corrupt politicians. However, with the Melaka Gateway project and a lot of others, the group of investors hasn't really changed too much. This is Duqm in Oman. Duqm is this massive new city that's being built way out in the middle of the desert, 500 kilometers from Muscat, like really out in the middle of the desert. And China has a section of this broader project called the China-Oman Industrial City. And that's Duqm right there, strategically located, halfway between China's shipment routes between China and Africa. And they're building a $10.7 billion transport-oriented new city. Here it is right there from the sky. And this is the China-Oman Industrial City. This video was taken about 2 years ago. As you can see, there's really not much there. There it is, pretty much empty. And fortunately, there's people who lived there before this project, local Bedouin, people like this. Just it's kind of funny how I met these guys. I was just taking pictures of them. They have a little shop, a little dry cleaner shop or a laundry shop in town. Just took some pictures of it, walked down the street, and all of a sudden the guy came up to me and in his truck was like, "Get in, come ride camels." So I got in, I rode some camels. But this is the relocation area that they built for the Bedouin to move to, that were relocated for this project. It's a completely new little city that nobody moved into. They refused to move in because they built them a modern city instead of a Bedouin-style city. So this place is sitting out there completely empty just because a lack of intercultural knowledge and understanding or tolerance. will the government do?
Maybe I don't know.
Okay, and now this takes us to Habantota in Sri Lanka, which was another major One Belt, One Road, Belt and Road project. Now this project was also actually not started by China. Most of these Belt and Road projects are not actually started by China, but they're started by local governments who have these dreams of development that need funding for them. And a lot of times these countries don't have very high credit ratings and they can't get the money to fund them from anybody but China. So they go to China and say, we want to be part of the Belt and Road. Please bring your bags of money. And in Habantota, this place was really a dream. It sits in the southern coast of Sri Lanka, which is almost completely undeveloped. These are, small fishing villages by the beach. And the then president of the country, Mahinda Rajapaksa, this is where he's from originally. And he wanted to turn this area out in the jungle into the second biggest city in Sri Lanka. And he did this with basically Chinese money, and they built a massive new seaport, the largest seaport to be built on land in the 21st century. A new airport, new conference centers, a massive new cricket stadium, and all these, big ticket elements of, urban development in a place where there's, no urban development, in a place where there's not people and businesses to fill these places. Habantota is meant to become the second biggest city in Sri Lanka, and it's almost completely financed by China, built by China, staffed by Chinese workers, and eventually the port came to be owned by China when Sri Lanka couldn't pay back their debts, or they didn't. Well, they would have rather have sold the port to China than had to do what they had to do to pay back that debt. I was there on the days I was there. I was kind of lucky because I actually got to see a ship come into port. That doesn't really happen very often. Now they get maybe 2 or 3 ships a month, which isn't much for a giant $10 billion seaport. And this is the world's emptiest international airport. I was the jerk that gave it that title. Now it's now that's kind of how it's known. It's also in Habantota. It was meant to kind of work in conjunction with the port to kind of create this transit-oriented development model that China has been very successful at doing in their own country. However, in places like Sri Lanka, it doesn't really, or hasn't really worked out so well. This airport is basically completely empty. There's hardly any flights. I was there at 10:10 in the morning, and the next flights didn't go out till the next day. And these flights are kind of forced by the Sri Lanka, or the airlines are encouraged by the Sri Lankan government to fly there or to be rerouted there. So you would have passengers like having layovers in Habantota on their way to and from Colombo, and nobody would get on or off the plane. So anyway, I had a problem when I was there because I took a tuk-tuk out, a little motorcycle taxi out to the airport. That was fine. That was easy to do, but getting back was another question. There was, of course, no public transportation out there, so I found myself standing on the side of the road, hitchhiking again. And this is the major highway that leads out to the airport. There's no cars at all on it. I was able to walk down the middle of it. And these are the people who lived on that coastline, the traditional fishermen. And they're not too happy about the port because now they can't go over there and fish. They say the military doesn't let them go near it. And basically their livelihood hasn't been destroyed, but it has been severely hampered by all of a sudden having this massive state-of-the-art deep sea port, right in your backyard. It's not conducive to traditional fishing methods. I'll put it like that. And anyway, now the seaport in Sri Lanka is a bulk cargo port. And bulk cargo ports usually need, industrial zones to go with them in order for them to be economically viable. And the plan for Habantota was to have, such an industrial park next to the port. However, they had to get the land from somewhere. And at some point, the locals looked around. They realized that there really wasn't any available land for I believe it was a 1,000 acre industrial park. And then one day, some people saw some guys going around planting flags and doing surveying in their fields, and they freaked out. And they had some pretty massive, pretty violent protest with mostly against the potential industrial park. The people didn't want their land taken. They didn't want to be displaced by the project, and it got pretty ugly. And this is a quote from Jonathan Hellman from the CSIS. Chinese companies push deeper into emerging markets and adequate enforcement of poor business practices that turned the BRI into a global trail of trouble. Now, when I started out this Belt and Road project, I believe I had a pretty middle-of-the-road view on China. Some people call me a panda hugger, some people call me a dragon slayer, which I thought that was kind of a nice place for a journalist to be. My book, Ghost Cities of China, was considered too critical to be translated into simplified Chinese and published in mainland China. It was considered to be too pro-China to be, translated into traditional Chinese and published in Taiwan. So financially speaking, that was a major blow. But I almost felt good about that, right? Because it kind of meant that you did your job as a journalist. However, as I traveled the Belt and Road, my take has been, I was very hopeful at the beginning. I listened to people, yeah, this could potentially happen. I've seen this happen in China. I know that this could happen. There's potential here. The Belt and Road Initiative essentially connects with many other similar initiatives in the world. The North-South Transport Corridor, Europe's Treka Corridor, and many other, Kazakhstan's Nerli-Joel Initiative. So basically, the song and dance of today is infrastructure development to kind of stimulate economic development. And the Belt and Road fell right in place with that. However, we're looking at project after project, mega project after mega project, billion dollar investment after billion dollar investment, not quite working out as planned. And like a lot of times these projects are sold to the local people as being, hey, yeah, this is going to disrupt your life. However, this is going to improve the economy, there'll be more jobs, you'll make more money, you can run your businesses. And as kind of rough, I'll put it that way, as China's urbanization initiative was in China, there was always that other side of the story that yes, economically, more often than not, this works. Chinese people are getting wealthier, there's more opportunities. And a lot of this came on the back of China's, very, very top down and very, very harsh urban development methods. So there was both sides to the story. In the Belt and Road, as of now, it's very hard to find that other positive side of the story as, stories of corruption. I mean, 50% of BRI partner countries have sovereign debt ratings of junk. Essentially, the strategy is China, who has a AAA rating, can get loans cheap. They transfer those loans to these developing countries at a higher rate than what is typically considered normal for money coming from a development bank, but much lower than what these countries could get these loans at on their own. So China's kind of a broker of debt. But this one statistic kind of shows kind of the profile of the countries that have really jumped into the Belt and Road. These are not, like top tier economies like the USA or, England. Well, England has been participating. England or Germany. There are countries like Cambodia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, kind of fledgling economies in emerging markets that want to develop at all cost. And they're willing to pay the cost, and they're willing to put the future of their country's economy on the line to kind of get this infrastructure that they feel they can propel their economies, to build economies, build new markets, build new cities, and build a new modern future off of. And China's pretty much the only country that is willing to get them enough money to do these projects. However, more often than not, these projects don't work out as planned, and that often has more to do with problems and issues in the countries themselves than it had to do with China. In a lot of ways, China has been kind of a victim of their own Belt and Road. And now that we've seen these projects kind of develop for the past 7 years, we kind of see countries kind of backing off and dropping out. They're canceling projects. Bangladesh, Malaysia, Myanmar, Pakistan, Sierra Leone have all canceled, major Belt and Road projects or kind of downsized them drastically. And then, just basic corruption. A lot of these deals do happen corruptly. It was even in the case of Najib in Malaysia. it was found that there was a deal with China to kind of help get him out of that jam before anybody knew about it. Basically, what they did is they signed some new development deals at an inflated cost, and the idea was that he could kind of scrape money off the top of that to put back in the development funds that he was being busted for, and nobody would know what happened. It was all a big misunderstanding, but that didn't really work out. However, China did not look really good in the end because they did try to participate in that cover-up. And of course, Chinese firms operating abroad. I mean, there's a saying in China that you catch more fish in murky waters, and that means, like Professor Ang talks about a lot, that kind of environments that we would call corrupt are kind of can be fertile ground for doing business, and Chinese companies are very, very good at operating in that environment. However, in this day and age, operating outside of China, there's a lot of eyes of the world on what you're doing, and it comes out not looking so well. And this is Melaka Gateway today. This project was started over 5 years ago, and it's just a slab of reclaimed land with nothing built on it. I haven't been able to confirm this with the developer, but the people in Portuguese settlement tell me that the Chinese developers have backed out. So basically, there's a slab of reclaimed land there. No new city, no Malaysia Eye Ferris wheel, no 7-star hotel. That's basically just polluted and damaged the local environment without providing any benefits of economic renewal or rejuvenation. This is Habantota. You can see it's still largely undeveloped. The port is operating, and I believe they're now making a $1 million a year profit, which is nothing. But the port is going, but this whole city dream of turning Habantota into the second biggest city in Sri Lanka, that's way off. This is the Oman, China industrial city. In Duqm, there's nothing there still. It's still an empty field. And this is Horgos Gateway, the shot that we started off this talk with. I was taken out there, building a new Dubai. They said, well, Dubai doesn't look like that. That you can see this is their special economic zone. It's been like that since I started going there over 5 years ago. No companies, no business, no nothing. And it's just kind of sitting out there on the border of China and Kazakhstan. In a place that Herodotus said the west winds come from. But anyway, so that's just kind of a take on where the Belt and Road is today. However, my talk is pretty critical, right? It's kind of hard not to be critical when you see this massive amounts of development and massive amounts of upheaval and impact on people's lives, not really producing the economic results they're supposed to produce. However, as we found out in the last Belt and Road Conference in Beijing in April, this is a 100-year plan, right? China's not giving up and going, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back is part of this world-changing initiative that the Belt and Road is supposed to be. However, the people of Portuguese settlement and Habantota and the Bedouin of Duqm, they don't have 100 years to wait around for their economies to develop. Right now, they're dealing with all the crap of development without the benefit. And that's basically where we stand right now. Are there any questions?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that speech. That was very interesting. I'm very curious more so about the political aspects. You very briefly touched on Sierra Leone there at the end. Mm-hmm. And so in the 2018 general election in Sierra Leone, what we saw a lot of was there was a lot of local Chinese business owners who started openly campaigning for the ruling party. Mm-hmm. They were attending rallies, holding placards, which very much goes against the neutrality which China often pushes as being why they are better than Western investors, mm-hmm. Or why they're less potentially dangerous. And so the question to me is, to what degree does the Chinese government control, or rather okay or approve, the local Chinese migrants and companies mm-hmm. Who end up taking sides in these mm-hmm. political?
Well, I'll answer that 2 ways. First of all, the Belt and Road China says it's an economic program, but you can't be, economic on that scale without also being political. And China, even top level, even official Belt and Road projects have meddled in, the political processes of pretty much every country that they've touched. Even going as far as, funding or helping fund Mahinda Rajapaksa's in Sri Lanka's re-election campaign. You can't do that, right? And this was, official Belt and Road projects. Another way to answer that is how much control does China have over their companies abroad, and what is Belt and Road and what is not Belt and Road. Most companies, even big major companies making major investments abroad that are from China, are not part of the Belt and Road initiative. They're doing these investments on their own. So the degree to which China can control these companies and keep them from meddling in the political processes of the countries that they're in, it's questionable. However, the Belt and Road is political, and there's certain politicians that they get behind and support, and there's certain ones that they don't. And I don't know if it could be any other way when these projects are often so tied to politicians, right? And when projects can change so much if a new politician or a new political party is elected. And that's really one of the weak points of the initiative is how closely connected to democratic ruling parties that it becomes very, very difficult for China to carry on long-term development when they get so tied into the local political spectrum.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey, hello.
Thank you again. I noticed that in the map you showed, there wasn't anything for the initiative in India, and I'm thinking there are only 3 reasons I can think of. Either there's nothing India has that China wants, India has denied China to do this, or it's like a containment strategy for a potential rival. And I was wondering which one you think it is, or if it's something completely different.
Yeah, I actually skipped this slide. Let's find it. This one here. Yeah, exactly. First of all, if you look at the official list of Belt and Road countries, India is on it, but India has had, a pretty big, at least public, adverse reaction to the Belt and Road due to the China-Pakistan economic corridor going through contested territory, and at least politically, under Modi, the attitude is that they're not really going to fully participate in the Belt and Road unless, they work out the issues in Pakistan first. However, yeah, you talk about a containment strategy. Some of the markets where the Belt and Road has made its deepest impact, like these countries in blue, they're kind of countries that are, traditionally overruled by a bigger regional power. So post-Soviet states, Russia, the countries around the periphery of India, Djibouti and Ethiopia, some Eastern European countries, and the EU. And a lot of times what these smaller, weaker countries will do is they will kind of bring China in and manipulate China, kind of use China as a counterweight against these more dominant, more powerful political units, more powerful countries that they have always been kind of under the thumb of. So it's both a containment strategy. Well, basically, it's create an opportunity for China to come in and make big deals in markets because these countries tend to welcome China in with open arms. First of all, for economic development, another way, because it gives them more independence by kind of having a counterweight to the economic influence. For example, in Sri Lanka, the economic influence of India, or in Kazakhstan, the economic and political influence of Russia. It makes them less dependent and less controlled by these countries. And it also kind of creates this great game of investment, right? Where a country like Bangladesh can say, oh, well, China's given us this much money, and we're going to let them make this infrastructure project, this port here. What are you going to give us, India? How are you going to counter this? And they kind of create their country into the staging ground of geoeconomic competition between various regional powers of the world. You want our alliance? Oh, how much money are you going to give us for our alliance, right? If you don't do this or that, or we're going to shift to China. So local politics and the ever vacillating position of these smaller countries kind of has a lot to play in where the Belt and Road develops and who gets the projects and who doesn't get the projects. But I think in the future that would change. India is of course a big part of it, and India also has two Silk Road strategies of their own that they're working on, mostly with Japan and even one of them with Iran and Russia. So. Thank you.
Hi, over on this side.
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks very much for your comments. It's great to see the specific examples. My question would be, if I were to attend a presentation like this in the, hosted by Mr. Shi, what would be the good examples he would promote to show the success of this effort? Now, even if they're just Potemkin villages, I'm sure they have some that they would say, these are our success stories.
Okay, I think they would say, first of all, about the number of countries that they signed MOUs with. And I don't know. I mean, as far as projects, as far as infrastructure, that's really what I looked at. There are no real life shining star examples of projects that are successful. I mean, there's Piraeus Port in Europe. He'd probably talk about Piraeus and how that went from kind of an underperforming, kind of lagging port in Europe to be one of the biggest and most busiest ports in the entire continent. I think a lot he would talk about is the people-people connections that are being developed, and rising tide lifts all ships, and community of the same destiny. I mean, the success here of the Belt and Road at this point is mostly in the fact that people are talking about it. It's an issue. People are participating. Governments are communicating together. I mean, I didn't mention it in this talk, but I mean, China along with Russia and Western Europe, they set up a 35 network freight train line, a freight train network linking China with Europe, and that's infrastructure. Not many goods are being shipped along these lines, but that shows kind of the intergovernmental connections and agreements that have been formed to make something like this possible. 10 years ago, you couldn't do that, right? You couldn't, put goods on a freight train in Chengdu and send it to Duisburg in Germany, because it's a lot of soft infrastructure that has to go in with that. A lot of agreements, got deals, and blah blah blah. And that has been, a success story of the Belt and Road. But that's, but a lot of that was driven by European countries and Russian companies, and China just kind of put up a lot of the money for that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how
Thank
you
you for
doing?
the talk. This question is going to be a two-parter, one about the actual initiatives and one about your personal journeys.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, for the first part, you mentioned at the end of the slides that Habantota has $1 million of revenue coming in every year.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, where is that coming from? Is that actual local sustainable businesses, or is it forced by the Chinese government or by the local government itself? And the second question has to do with your personal journeys, and I wonder how can you really trust people when you hitchhike and you go on these chance events with people. I'm just really curious.
Okay, to answer the first question, I mean, the revenue is derived from ships coming in. That's direct revenue, and not revenue that's kind of happened on the peripheries or because of the project. That's just the shipping dues or however they organize the payments from the ships coming in. Because I mean, ships do go there, but it's not enough to warrant that big of a port in that location. And many could say that these ships could just as easily go to Colombo, where there's another major port run by China's Costco Shipping, and rather than not going to Habantota. But it's pretty political. I mean, just like with the flights being diverted to Habantota, ships are being diverted to Habantota. There's no reason for them to go there, because there isn't an industrial zone there. What are they going to do? Now you drop off your goods. Mostly cars are being delivered there. Now what do you do? Now do you drive them to Colombo? You know what I mean? So it's pretty political and pretty artificial, because a lot of two countries and many politicians have kind of risked their reputations on these projects. The second question about hitchhiking, I don't know. I mean, I pretty much trust people and trust your gut. I didn't really trust the Bedouin at first that came up and told me to get into his truck, right? But I've traveled in Middle Eastern, North African places before, and I kind of know the Bedouin have kind of a gruff way of talking, right? Mm-hmm. Very, very generous, very, very open people, but the way they talk, they kind of talk in demands, right? So this guy pulling up in his truck saying, "Get in," it's kind of different than an American doing it. Yeah. But walking down the road, America say, "Get in." I'm not getting in with you. I'm I'm going away. I'm going somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, some of these like new cities and new areas, there's no other way to really travel, right? In China's ghost cities, I had to do a lot of hitchhiking, which is pretty easy to do in China. I also had a folding bicycle, so I could put it on a train or a bus, and then I hop off and just ride my little bike into the ghost city. But in Duqm, there's no other way to get around other than like renting a car and driving it, 550 kilometers from Muscat. There's, no public transport there because there's not really any people there.
Yeah.
So
So it's a little out of necessity, a little intuition.
a little out of necessity, a little out of intuition, and it makes things interesting too. So when you go to new cities, I mean, the people that you want to talk to are people that are either involved in creating the new city or people who are being impacted by that. And everybody there is going to fall under, one of those two criteria. So you hitch with someone, and all of a sudden you have, an interview target just sitting right there in the car, and they can't get away from you. So
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, I have sort of a different area to go with this. At the end of your talk, I started to think, are we looking at a rerun of 19th and 20th century imperialism by European countries? Mm-hmm. Did you ever give any thought to that?
Ooh, that's really tough. That's a really tough question to answer. Because if you look at the guts of a lot of these Belt and Road projects, they're actually started by the countries that they're happening in, and not really China going around the world trying to push these projects on anybody. China's being basically, at least in the early days, were welcomed in with open arms. However, Chinese, politicians and ambassadors and companies, they're really good at using leverage, to kind of get what they want. And if a government knows, if politicians know that X amount of their GDP is coming from China-run projects, they're probably going to be hesitant to bite the hand that feeds, right? When they know that they need China for loans, they're probably going to sway towards support in China, both in both in issues like in their own country and also internationally as well, as we see with Greece, voting with China and in EU meetings and stuff like that. It's because China has a major impact on the Greek economy. So I mean, it is a form of imperialism, but it's on the surface it appears hands off, right? It appears hands off, appears that countries are sovereign. But I mean, it's the same with any country. I mean, if a country is making like billions and billions of dollars of investment in your country, they have influence over that country, or a city, I mean,
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. In the course of all your travels over Belt and Road projects, did you see any military or expansionist activities or anything that might lead in that direction?
only in Xinjiang. But
Oh, okay.
that's beyond the scope of this talk. Yeah, I was detained a couple times in Xinjiang actually, but yeah, as far as outside of that, no. I mean we have this saying, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free? Like U.S. kind of imperialist strategy was putting the military on the ground. We buy the cow, right? China doesn't really have to because it can acquire and exert influence and leverage over countries without using their military might. However, that's a really good question because you have some of these projects, such as Gwadar Port in Pakistan, that's kind of in contested territory and militarized territory. And the question is, what if? The Chinese embassy in Karachi was bombed, about a year and a half ago by Gwadar separatist groups. Now, what if one of these projects are, if they do come under fire of terrorism or paramilitary group? How does China respond? Right now, the kind of domestic countries are kind of taking care of security for these projects. But what if that's not good enough, right? What happens? I don't know. I mean, if someone attacked a major American investment project abroad, we'd probably put our military out there. That's pretty standard fare. However, it's my impression, and I could be wrong, is that China seeks to kind of avoid any kind of military actions overseas in areas that they don't view as being part of their sovereignty. They have other ways and other means of dealing with these things. That's kind of more along the lines of how countries are now exerting influence over each other in the 21st century. It's not really military. The military is kind of the old way. Now it's economics, and they're using economics to kind of get the similar results. But who knows? Who knows?
Thank you.
But what's really like I don't want to say concerning, but kind of similar to that is kind of public surveillance networks that's been set up in Xinjiang, who's being marketed to other countries along the Belt and Road, particularly in Central Asia, that have a want for these technologies, and in potentially rest of areas deploying these technologies to kind of allow governments, whether rightly or wrongly, to exert broader control.
One of the things that's interesting for anybody that's been involved with international development, whether you've worked for the World Bank or the United Nations or USAID, is that for infrastructure projects, there's always corruption. There's always, particularly working at the local level, ways in which huge amounts of resources get squandered. If you look at U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, for example. So the difference between Chinese development and basically these other kinds of efforts to develop developing countries is that the infrastructure projects of the Chinese get built by the Chinese, operated by the Chinese. They actually get built in contrast to what occurred before. I was in Nepal, where the Chinese built a road from Lhasa to Kathmandu. Then immediately, beautiful road, immediately closed the road for political reasons. They didn't want people going from Nepal to Tibet. But the road is there. And so I see that, in fact, in China, whether it's the cities or the other activities that are being built, it's the infrastructure gets constructed. Whether anybody uses it or not is something that seems to escape them.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, once you build these infrastructure grids, they last for like a long time. I mean, a lot of countries in the world, people still travel on the roads that they traveled on 100, 200, even in my case, 1,000 years ago, right? And building these new infrastructure networks, even though you got to repay the roads and rebuild the airports, they're going to stay there for a really, really, really long time. And who controls them is probably one of the major questions of the 21st century.
And it's likely that somebody will figure out how to use them, maybe in ways that are very different than what people had originally proposed.
Exactly. But yeah, what you say about corruption is true. I mean, there's corruption, all levels of infrastructure development in most countries in the world. What makes China different is that a lot of this corruption has been politicized and used to the advantage of opposition political parties to kind of get in power, because they associate China with their corrupt leaders, and then if they broadcast that to the public, then all of a sudden they have a platform that they can get elected on, and they've done that. In Sri Lanka, we saw 2 cycles of that, right? The corruption with Rajapaksa. Let's get him out of power. Next guy's come along, and then Rajapaksa's nephew or cousin or something, he comes back to power. Oh, corruption with China, blah blah blah. So China's often being used as kind of this political tool in these very diverse and very vacillating democracies. And part of the learning curve for China is, how do you deal with democracy? Because in China, you don't have these problems. You can go out and start an infrastructure project that's a 10, 20-year project, and you don't worry about the political will being behind the project 5, 10 years from now. But in countries that have elect new people every 4 years, that's a major concern. So a major problem for the Belt and Road going forward, or a major question is, how do we look good to the local people that they're not going to vote us out of power? Because essentially, we're being voted out of power because we are associated with the politicians that give us the go-ahead to build these projects. But China's answer so far has been suing. You can't shut down our project because we have a contract, and just because you're a new government, you can't get out of this contract. Like Colombo Port City, massive new city being built, and financial center that's being built right off the coast of Colombo on reclaimed land that the government wanted to shut down when a new government came to power. China said, you can't do that. We have a contract, and it's being built today. So it's interesting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.